to me now. Hey everybody, Big Mess coming to you from Tuckasegee Fly Shop here in Waynesville, North Carolina. And we had a comment from a customer or a viewer who had watched one of our YouTube videos about the reels. And their question and suggestion was, I'm new to fly fishing. I haven't been doing this long. Could you please go over what the weights of the rods and how you match a line up to those particular rods? And I'm like, you know, some of those things we do take for granted in a lot of cases, and it really didn't discuss those when we did the reel video series with you, except, hey, you know, this one's good for a 3, 4, or 5, or so on and so forth. So what I've done here today is I've got 3 rod butt sections with 3 specific fly lines, and these are in no means suggestions that you should match this line up with these particular rods. I'm not saying that at all. The reason why I selected these is first and foremost, they're easy to see when I pick these up. I feel like that's important right now for visibility. But I've got 3 different rod butt sections here. I have an Orvis, I have a Scott, and I have a Sage. Once again, not showing a preference to one rod manufacturer over the other. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what rod manufacturer it has that you have. It really boils down to the information on the identifying section of the rod. So the rods come in plethora of sizes. You know, really lightweight rods up to 11 and 12 weight rods for your big game. And those rods are identified here with the Orvis. They call it their quick rod identifier. It's going to have the length of the rod and the line weight. So what the manufacturer has done in these rods, they have designed this rod to perform with a 3 weight line. So when it has a 3, this one here is a 7.5 foot 3 weight, we need to be looking at a 3 weight line. And for those of you folks who may know this already, just please bear with me, your line are measured in grain weights. So there's there's like a uniform measuring system. That's not the right word, but it's a common sense word, that if it's this particular grain weight, we're looking at a 3 weight. If it's X amount of grain weight, we're looking at a 4. If it's X amount of grain weight, we're looking at a 5, so on and so on and so on and so on. So more often than not, the general rule of thumb is if you have a 3 weight rod, you want to put a 3 weight line on it. Now, could you overweight it? Yeah, you could in specific situations, and we could do a whole video series on lines and line weights, because there's lines that are half size heavy. There are lines that are almost like a full line size heavy, even though it can get a little bit confusing. But for someone who's real techie, you can get really dialed in on these lines and these rods and to get the optimal performance that you're looking for. So our suggestion is, if you're doing a 3 weight rod, we want to be looking at a 3 weight line. Also, you want to match up the appropriate reel size that I went over with you in the previous series on the reels. You'd want to get a reel that's going to match up well to that 3 weight rod, so you have that nice balance. The next rod I'm going to pick up is a 4 weight. This is where we start confusing the water just a little bit here. Once again, on the Scott rod, we have it right here. It tells me it's a 4 weight. I'm immediately going to go to the 4 weight line on the wall, because more often than not, they're going to ask a Justin or a Taylor or an Adam or whoever's working the shop that day, can you recommend a line for me? So we try to ask some qualifying questions. Hey, you know, where are you fishing at? Are you making longer casts? Are you doing some bow casting? What's your budget? Those type things, so we can help you select a line. But we always have to kind of keep this general rule of thumb is, if it's a 4, we're going to be looking at a 4 weight. Now, could we put a 5 weight line on a 4 weight rod? We certainly can. Could we put a 3 weight line on a 4 weight rod? We don't want to do that. because you don't have the amount of grain weight that's going to have this rod perform in its optimal performance, and you really feel that in your casting, okay? The energy we do with our casting stroke coupled with the mass of these fly lines is what helps build up that energy in that rod. So when you come to that stopping point, she sails out there for you. I'm going to pick up a 5-weight. This happens to be a Sage, the R8 core that we did a video on. Once again, after some qualifying questions, we're going to go to a 5-weight line that's going to suit the needs for the type of fishing you're doing. Can we put a 4-weight on it? No, we're not going to do that. It's not going to perform right. You're going to come back and say, man, this rod casts poorly. And when we see that happen is usually when somebody's got a rod, they didn't know what weight the rod was. They got it as a gift. They got it in the garage. They just randomly bought a fly line. Hey, I've got a problem with my line. My line needs to be replaced. And we find a lot of cases there, what's happened is we don't have the proper line to the proper rod ratio. Now, as you step up into your other rods, if it's 6, we recommend a 6-weight. If it's a 7, we recommend a 7-weight, so on and so forth. That's just your basics of basics. If you want to get really technical, you could take a Rio, you can take a Scientific Anglers, these a couple of rod and line companies that we carry in the shop. They have a lot of lines out there. And we have a few anglers, not everybody, but we have a few anglers who want maybe a half size a heavy, maybe a short belly taper. They're looking for that for a specific purpose. And then, we can work with them on that. You also have to keep in mind too, the lines that I'm currently showing you today, these are floating fly lines. And I'd say probably 90% of the lines we sell, or maybe a little bit higher, are floating fly lines because they're going to do most of what you want to do here for us and for most anglers. However, when you get into maybe some streamer tactics or even some saltwater game, for sure, you have some different lines. Some of those could be sinking. And when you get into sinking, you have different sink rates. When you get into saltwater, you have different rates on those. Some are floating, some of those are sink rates, some of those are a camo tip or a clear tip line. And the other thing that brings me to, we're going down a rabbit hole, but it's a good rabbit hole here, is cold water line versus a warm water line and versus a salt water line. These lines have specific coating. So these trout lines that we have, these are designed for what we call a cold water application. I would not want to take this line and I want to put it in a saltwater application because it's not going to hold up. Or vice versa. You don't want a saltwater line to be used in a cold water situation. Warm water, such as our bass lines that we're doing right there, once again, they're made for a specific applications and they're only going to hold up in those specific water type conditions there. So that's something to keep in mind too. If you're doing trout, we're going to say, hey, if you've got a 4-weight, we're going to look at 4-weight lines. If you got a 3-weight, we're going to look at 3-weight lines. And if you got a 5, we're going to look at 5-weight lines, so on and so forth. So that by far, hopefully, the simplest explanation I can give you. Make sure that you're matching that number to your line weight. And if you do that, you're going to be a lot happier with the performance of your rod than if you were to underline it. If you have any more questions or any more suggestions on what other videos we should be doing for you, please let us know. You can do that in the comment section below. If you have questions too, stop into the shop. Talk to any of us here. We'll be glad to take time, go over some of the specifications on the lines. And sometimes some of the manufacturers too will have suggestions on their website on what lines perform the best on those particular rods as well. And we can take a look at that too. But you got to stop by the shop to do that, to have that one-on-one conversation with us. 3 Depot Street, Bryson City, North Carolina. 530 West Main Street, Sylva, North Carolina, and 110 Depot Street in Waynesville, North Carolina. You can always call us at 828-488-3333. These items I have in front of us here, a lot of these things are available on our web store. That's flyshopusa.com. Hey, feel free to follow all of our other social media accounts, Facebook, Instagram, and also listen to our podcast, The Tuckcast with a Splash of Bourbon, as sometimes we dive into these topics when we go down those paths as well. Thank you, folks, for watching. Give us a thumbs up, and we look forward to seeing you on the next video. Y'all take care.